people don't necessarily just want the person across the street that's done the same thing at the same kind of company. They want new ways of thinking. And so then you have to think, well, what even could make sense? Because you also don't want to go too far in the other direction. And then what we call organ rejection. Someone
Yeah.
shows up and they're like, wait, what is this? you know, like, what did I walk into? So
You call it
there's a,
organ rejection.
yes.
I mean, that's awesome. Guys, I'm super excited to introduce you to Somer Hackley. Somer and I have known each other for a number of years, and she's someone that I'm excited to have on the Ripple Effect podcast because I want to celebrate her new book, Search in Plain Sight, Demystifying Executive Search. Somer has been in this executive search game for quite a while. She has a laundry list of clients that have really loved working with her. Her firm, Distinguished Search, is really changing the way that people look at career transition. And I think with her book, one of the things that I was most excited to dive in and learn from her today is the fact that this industry has changed and how you go about finding really what work you are passionate about and how to where you want to go invest your time and energy and your effort and to make it in alignment with who you are as an individual to do the kind of work that really, really floats your boat, I think is really critical. And so I know that she's going to give us some great insights there. And obviously, since COVID, the whole transition, the whole change, the way that we go about finding work, the way that we go and look for the possibilities of what a career transition might look like for us is really important. So I'm excited to dive in. Plus, she is a really, really great person. She is someone that has a unique energy and enthusiasm. She's passionate about the work she does, but she is definitely a rippler. So I'm so excited to get engaged in this interview and in this conversation. And with no further ado, let's dive right in. Guys, I am super excited to have Somer join us today for the Ripple Effect podcast. Somer, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Steve?
I'm great. I'm excited to ripple with you. I mean, we've been trying to put this together for a while. So
I know. No, thank
what
you for the invitation. I love your podcast. I'm so happy
oh,
to be
thank you
here.
so much. I appreciate that. It means the world to me. I sort of said in your intro, like you're somebody that has such enthusiasm for what you do, and you bring a certain energy. And I'm just excited for my folks to hear you and to learn about your book and everything great that you've got going on today. But one of the things I always like to do to start off with is kind of get an origin story, like a little bit about how you got to where you are, how you became this awesome person that you are today. So maybe just give us a little bit of background if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. I feel like our energy will feed off each other. So that is awesome. So, yeah, I grew up in New York and then went to DC and Dallas for a year. And here I am in Austin. And I just absolutely love it. Been here since 2019. And I started my career 22 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it's okay. And I've been recruiting that whole time. I started my own firm a month before COVID. So that was interesting timing. I didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. It's all is good in the end. But yeah, I started out in contingency, then went to retained, and then went to a boutique, still doing retained, and here I am. So, and I'd say recruiting mainly like VP plus, a lot
Okay.
of C level, a lot of VP, sometimes director, and mainly tech roles, but a lot of cross industry sort of movement, versus musical chairs. But I've done honestly all kinds of things. So, but
Well, so
that's my
how
bread
did
and
you
butter.
pick this as a career path? Like, I mean, what was the inspiration behind wanting to be a part of that search process?
Yes, and there are no majors in recruiting, right? So I majored in economics, actually, of all things. I thought math was fun and probably looked good. It looked like I have a brain, when I graduated. Um, but I went on a ton of internships, and then someone told me you should go into sales, and that just blew everyone's mind because I
Yeah.
was not definitely wasn't as confident 22 years ago or 25 years. Like college is awkward, high school
Yeah.
is awkward, and I was like, interesting. But I liked the idea of what you put in is what you get out. And I was like, I can do it. And so I interviewed for every single sales job I could find on monster.com back in 2002. And one of those was recruiting. And it really just spoke to me. I'm like, that's interesting. I can get behind the people aspect
Yeah.
versus all the other types of sales jobs, interviews I was going on. And then I was just hooked. So that's how I found it. Ultimately, was just the epiphany of sales and then just interviewing for every single sales job I could possibly find.
I love that. So what motivated the move from, New York to Austin?
Yeah, so I went New York, DC, well, I guess New York, Virginia, DC, Austin. And so I met my husband at the time. We weren't married, but I met him in Virginia. Then we moved to DC together, and then he just came to me. He went to UT here,
Okay.
and he was just like, "Let's get out of here." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Where do you want to go?" We made a list. It was Austin or Chicago. Chicago is just very cold. I do love
Yeah.
it though. And he's like, "Let's go to Austin." I'm like, "I'm game. Let's do it." And so we just moved, and he ignited his job search. He found a position here, and so then, yeah, we just showed up, and I just coincided the timing of I'd honestly been telling work I'd been wanting to start my own thing for like 3 years, and
Yeah.
so with the move to Austin, I'm like, "You're right. I'm just doing it. I'm just gonna hang my shingle." So yeah, but it worked out. I love it here.
Well, so talk to me about that. So like you moved to a new town, you don't really have a network established. You and I connected about that first, sort of
Yes.
that first year, year and a half you were in town. And you start your own thing. So what was that like? I mean, to walk us through that journey a little bit, because
Mhm.
that had to be a little bit spooky, right?
Yeah, and I had a 6-month non-compete, so and I'm like a very, I don't know, like anxious, like I need to sleep well at night person. So
Yep.
I didn't want to not abide by my non-compete. So I
Yeah.
legit had a 6-month non-compete. And so that was hard because I'm a workaholic. My husband was kind of nervous about like what is my default state when I'm not just in it, with
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was fun. I'll tell you, it wasn't like I went insane, but I got the space to think about how I wanted to set things up the right way, and I got to just, just I don't know, just all the little things that you just never have time to do on a day-to-day basis. It was just really nice. But yeah, it wasn't that scary. I think at the time I had enough confidence to go off on my own. And so because I did have enough clients coming to me with work that I felt, hey, and really my intention of starting my own thing was instead of being the face of 30 positions to fill at a time, I wanted to
Yeah.
do the work. Like that's the interesting about recruiting is the more senior you get, the less recruiting you actually do. And so like you're just talking about recruiting versus doing recruiting. Like you're talking about the candidates, you're talking to the client, you're making recommendations, but you're not the one finding the candidates, networking as much, right? You have a whole
Right.
team under you. And so I'm like, I think I can work on 1 to 3 roles at a time instead of 30 and do a better job and love it and have more fun. So I was like, I think I'll be fine. So I didn't actually have all that nervousness because I was doing the same thing just on my own. Um, and I felt a little unleashed, to be honest. I don't know why I didn't do all the things I'm doing now before, but it feels different when it's me and my
Well, you're an
brand.
entrepreneur now, so it's just
Yeah,
different, right?
it is. And kudos to you back in the day because you were like, "Have you thought about posting on LinkedIn?" I'm like, "Huh." Like up until then, I really just kind of share, like, comments, but I didn't really just say, "Here's what I think about this thing," or here's what I recommend you do. I've talked to this person in this situation, and you actually gave me some ideas for those first posts of like what to even post about. You're like, "What do you think about starting your firm, or what challenges you're facing, or why did you do this?" I'm like, interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. And then it kind of just is a flywheel on its own. So that
Yeah.
was fun. And then making my website was fun and thinking of my value prop, like what is it? And that was fun. And then I started my video series and then I wrote a book because it was it was COVID a month after starting. And I had all this momentum, like, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. I'm open for
And then
business.
boom.
Boom. Like, we can't hire now. Like, it's a pandemic. Everyone's home. We have no idea what's I'm like, you are correct. I will back off. And
Well,
so,
did
yeah.
that make you question it, or did it just like recommit you to be like, "Hey, we're gonna figure it out. It's a different time. This is gonna be a different way that we come out of this thing," or what were you thinking at the time
Yeah.
when COVID hit?
Well, if you remember in the beginning, COVID was more like a delayed airplane situation where they're like,
Yeah,
it's 2 weeks, you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
another 2 weeks. I'm like, 2 weeks, no big deal. Another 2 weeks, no big deal. And all of a sudden it's like 2 years. But in the beginning, if they said this is a 2 year, at least 1 year situation, I might have had a different reaction.
yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
like, 2 weeks, no big deal, you know? So I think
You can
because it
survive
was
that. Yeah, it's like a
yeah,
vacation, right?
I think because it just kept kicking the can on the seriousness. And then I was just kind of all in. But I think I had optimism that it would not last forever and it would be okay. And I just caught up with lots of people, and like that's where the book really came from, was just chatting with people about how are you? And then I came to realize that people had so many questions about recruiting and how it all works from a job
Yeah.
seeker perspective. And I'm like, I'm just going to write all this down. It's not a big secret, but yeah, I don't think I think I just had to pause and rethink how I was going to navigate it. And honestly, all of those catch ups with job seekers helped me have the confidence that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because they told me that other search firms were on hold, but not everything was on hold and companies were figuring it out. So I kind of stayed plugged in through all that versus just being a hermit and just, crying. And I had a baby in 2022, and that was all kind of nuts with just the coming out of the pandemic and just being pregnant during COVID. I was a definite hermit during that
Yeah,
time.
you
So
definitely don't let the grass grow under your feet. You're obviously, "Hey, let me take on one more challenge," right?
I know, I know.
Launch the
Yeah.
firm and, have a kid. I mean, yeah, good for you though.
Thank you.
So how do you I mean, I'm curious. I think for a lot of the folks that will listen to this podcast, there is a lot of questions, and we're gonna jump into the book
Yeah.
here in just a sec. But what do you want people to know most about what that recruiting process is?
Mm.
What are the things that you wish people knew more about in terms of the process?
I think ultimately that it's a relationship, not a transaction, and it's not about a resume.
Yeah,
And I view resumes as following people through the process, not the door opener. And even as a recruiter, there's so much that good recruiters do beyond what do you need? Let me go find it here.
yeah,
It's a process, it's an emotional journey. There's a lot of mental horsepower that it takes to really understand not only people but also companies' trajectories,
yeah.
and you're matching journeys. You're matching the company's going through
I
this,
love that.
person's gone through that. Have they done it more than once? Because if they have multiple playbooks, that's even better. So they don't just default to the one way they know. And
Yeah,
it's really like you really have to sit and think. Does it? Because a lot of this, especially with, like I said in the beginning, the cross industry moves, people don't necessarily just want the person across the street that's done the same thing at the same kind of company. They want new ways of thinking. And so then you have to think, well, what even could make sense? Because you also don't want to go too far in the other direction, and then what we call organ rejection. Someone
yeah.
shows up and they're like, "Wait, what is this?" you know, like, what did I walk into? So
You call it
there's a
organ rejection.
yes,
I mean, that's awesome.
like there's a balance of positioning things well and being
Yeah,
honest and overselling, and I think there's just a lot of chat online about just how to automate recruiting, how to do this or ghosting or just all. I'm like, this all stems from transactional
sure.
problems,
Yeah,
or, just incentives not being aligned. But yeah, I think a lot about this stuff, as you can tell, hence a book. But I do believe that the second people realize that it's not about a resume, it's a whole other thing.
yeah,
And I could go on and on. It's like, what is the client doing to set things up internally politically to make sure that they're ready for this person? How are we getting feedback after each interview? Who's even interviewing the person? How are we just the whole, like, I feel like positions are accepted and candidates make up their mind, and hiring managers too, in between the interviews.
yeah.
There's just so much happening in between, all the texts, all the calls, all the emails. It's not just the interview. So anyway, that would be my big takeaway, is relationship and journey matching.
I love that. I love how you approach it, because you really are approaching it from both sides. You're making it a relational experience on both sides of the fence, right? And that's really
Mhm.
critical to make sure that there's a good match. You don't have that organ rejection kind of
Mhm.
situation. But what is it about companies that you think, what have you seen, or how has it shifted with regards to especially in the tech sector, how this has shifted even since COVID. Have you seen a big shift on your end?
Mm.
Do you feel like there's more accommodating to that relational process, or is it still trying to be a numbers game in a lot of ways?
It does depend on the client. But I will say, with COVID, the big thing that's changed is video interviewing instead of in-person
Yeah,
interviewing. It used to be aligning, maybe the candidate flies out if it's a relocation, which the more senior you get, the more often that happens. And then we have to align, 7 people to meet the candidate. We have to get a hotel and the whole thing, who's going to have lunch with the candidate, and so now. maybe the candidate flies out at the end before an offer just to make sure it's the right kind of thing and opportunity for them, and that, they
Yeah.
have that relationship, but not always. And I think what comes with video interviewing is this ease of connecting, which also makes things very clunky.
Yeah.
You can be like Zoom here, Zoom there, Zoom here, Zoom there. Oh, I can't make the Zoom. Oh, and if you have a Zoom in the middle of the day, how often is your head someplace else?
Yeah.
And then you show up to a Zoom and you're just like, okay, I have to interview this person. So it's hard on clients sometimes too to be there and be present and explain the position correctly, and really be attentive. And also I've heard, candidates, I'll get feedback from clients that their eyes are darting all over their screen, like they've got Slack open, they've got, they just can't help it. And so, like, what if you have a work thing pop up? If you're flying somewhere and you're meeting people in person, like your phone is in your pocket,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's created this whole casualness, but also I don't want to say laziness, but it's too easy to, oh, let's have them meet another person. Let's have them meet another person. So the interviews can go on forever. The process can seem disjointed. Feedback might be harder to get. So it's on us to rein it in,
Yeah.
and really rein it in the beginning. Who's this person meeting? Why? What are they covering? How are we getting feedback? All that kind of stuff, just so that it still feels like a process, because it used to be like first round you meet these people, second round you meet these people, then we're done. Now it's like let's meet these 14 people all the time. It's just, it can get out of control very quickly.
Well, and like you said on Zoom, it's really hard to that 2D experience. I mean, there are certain things you can do to connect with the other person. I mean, we're clearly doing it.
Mhm.
Hopefully, we're both polished and practiced at it. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, when you pop up and you're like, I have no idea who I'm really meeting with, or I've got just very limited window into who that person is that's going to be interviewing me, or I'm interviewing, the ability to build that rapport in a online kind of interaction is really really challenging. So I'm curious, do you have like ideas for candidates as well as the interviewers in terms of the approach to try and personalize that a little bit so it doesn't feel so
Mhm.
disconnected in the process? Is that something you coach on both sides of the fence, to get over?
Yeah, I think that what I see works is we open up lines of communication between the candidate and the hiring manager before offer, so they can
Yeah.
text, they can call each other.
Oh.
Maybe it's not just because they usually have that first interview, and
Yeah.
that's very much an interview, but then you still need to want to work for this person, and you want to also make sure that they're the right person for your company. And so I'm like, just text each other, just call each other, just have that rapport so that you can
Yep.
get all your questions answered before an offer comes out. You don't want the offer to come out and then say, "Oh, I have these 10 questions." Like that means the offer came too early.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy to have people just stay in touch and be in touch, once we start getting down the line. And I think for, good recruiters will have calls in between interviews with candidates and kind of play that therapist.
Yeah.
It's an emotional decision. And so if a candidate's raising concerns or anything, it's up to us to raise it at the right time in the right way to not spook anyone, but also to get those questions answered. So
Yeah.
I think we can play a big role as recruiters in easing that, in that journey.
Well, I think that's critical, right? What you just touched on. I mean, that is a authentic approach. One of your clients I know described you as having a real sense of authenticity that you brought to the process, and that you have this people centered approach to the work that you do, which I think is great. I've heard, and you probably as well heard these horror stories of the recruiter that basically just drops you into the bucket. It's like good luck,
Yeah.
sink or swim, and did it work or did it not? And do I need to get another candidate in? And it's that transactional piece that you were talking about. I think that really is challenging for everybody, but specifically from a recruiter's perspective, you're not really building the momentum for either the candidate or the client, and you're really doing both a disservice. So I love the fact
Hmm.
that you're really so heavily involved and engaged at that.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, the people aspect it's huge. And I think often, how do you gain trust
Yeah.
quickly with someone, especially if it's just over the phone? Honestly, I like phone more than video. I find
Yeah.
that I can, yeah, like I really do. And it's funny because I felt like it was a big secret because everyone's like, oh, video, video, even before COVID, video, video, video. And I kind of always like phone. And it's not because I don't want to look professional. It's because I can really listen. And I think people can just be authentic and
Yeah.
not worry, like when you're on video, you're worried, what do I look like? Where am I looking? All these other things are in your head and just taking up headspace. Or you're thinking about the other person. Oh no, like how are they looking? Like what did they react to? Or, when you're on the phone, and then Adam Grant had a podcast that came out with saying how it's actually easier to assess someone's like true intent and all that just from their voice. So
Yeah.
their emotion. And so I find that when I just listen and I'm not distracted and I'm not on video, you can really develop trust with people, but you have to not be distracted, and you have to be asking questions that you don't want to hear answers to, maybe, right? Like
Yep.
but you're okay with the answer, and you give people an out all the time. If this isn't the job for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something else in another year, but I think just being open-minded about that the end result is what's best for everyone. And like, hey, like just let me know because there's other candidates who are really interested. And it's okay if this isn't the right thing, versus take the job. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
That's not good for anybody.
No, it's not good for anybody. That's for sure. Well, before we dive into the book, tell me about 2 distinguished minutes with, Somer. I mean,
Yeah.
the what you're doing, and I love that, right? And I think the I watched several of these. I thought I was subscribed, but I guess I wasn't. So I
Okay.
fixed that. But tell me about that. What was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, well, as you likely know, Simon Sinek has an awesome start with why, and his
Yeah.
whole mantra is why do we do what we do? And when I was starting my company, I went down the rabbit hole of research and I landed on his TED talk, and I'm like, why do I do what I do? And I just thought
Yeah.
about it. And then you have to ask another why and another why, another why to get to the real why. And then I'm like, why don't I just ask people? How often do we ask people why they do what they do? We usually ask people what they do, what they're proud of, and so it was nice to take a step back. And also it was at the height of COVID, so everyone had a podcast or a webinar or something they were doing,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I want one.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and so I met with two of my, they're not technically advisors, but they're two women that I have gotten to know over the years. They're actually used to be candidates or clients of mine at different points in time. Usually that relationship kind of flips and flops depending where people are at what point. And so both of them said to me that the content out there was just so like long form. There's just a lot of it, so it's harder to stand out. And so
Yeah.
why don't I do something short? And so I was like, maybe it's a minute. And they're like, well, maybe two, you know? So yeah. And then I would just ask people, these are folks I've known for a long time. And I would just email, hey, I'd love to have you on my video series, ask you, why do you do what you do? And it's been really fun.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, you do a great job with it. So let's dive into the book. I uh, I really love I love the title, right? And search in plain sight, demystifying executive search. So first of all, how does it feel to be a published author?
It's awesome. It's really great. And thank you for the title. And as you know, you have a book or many books. It's so hard to figure out the title. So hard. Everyone has opinions. Ugh, it's so bad. So I was just texting with my best friend actually, like right before it was due, and I'm like, I am like, here are the 50 ideas everyone was giving me. I hate them or they're great in different ways. But everyone's telling me like I had demystifying executive search as the title. Everyone's like, it's a subtitle. It's a subtitle. It's really hard to come. She was like, how about, and she came up with search in plain sight. So yeah, so kudos to give her all the thanks. It's,
Okay, and who's that friend? We should just
um,
we got to get it on video now.
her name is Erin Patterson. Yeah,
All right, way to go,
she's,
Aaron. I'm going to hit you up
yeah.
for my next book.
Yeah, she's very good at title generation. She was
That's
just thinking about
awesome.
recruiting, and yeah, no, it was awesome. But yeah, it feels really great. And the crazy thing is I had our son, I gave birth to our son a week after the book was published. So I published the book. Thank God it was that order, but I published the book and then I went away for 3 months. And so it kind of just sat there. I'm like, I hope people read it, I hope someone finds this thing. So it's been taking off more recently, which has been really fun to see. But it's honestly really great to have a resource to give to people, because I do feel like there's a void in this whole area of advice like a lot of folks say like I've never looked for a job. I've been here for 15 years. I don't know where to start. I don't know
Yeah.
recruiters. Whenever they've called me before, I've said, go away. I don't need a job. And now what do I do? Now I need them. And, people find themselves in these positions where they're either not getting the phone calls, you can't really apply online, A, because there's too many people applying online, or B, the
Yeah.
roles aren't advertised usually that are retained. And there's also this other subset of people who are about to be VP or about to be C level, and they're interviewing, or they want the top job. They want an enterprise, horizontal job, and they're interviewing and always told they're too junior for that job, and they're just like, what am I not saying? So, so the book is really uncovering, like, what are people saying about you behind your back? Who are the people that are getting the calls? Who are the people that are getting past the recruiter and to the client? And really how to position. It's not just talking about it, but then it's like what
Yeah.
to do about it. How to position yourself to get the calls, to get past the recruiter, to get through all the client interviews, how to negotiate comp, how does that work? Why you're not getting feedback? That's the biggest complaint everybody has. Is I go on interviews, I don't hear back, and it's
Yeah.
terrible. But at least I explain why it's happening. It's not always that you're a terrible interviewer. Usually it's not. So, but here are the other 20 reasons. So I just wanted to bring that all to light, and I'm just thrilled that it can just help people not only figure out what to do, but also just mentally just give themselves a break. You're not in this alone. These are common things that everyone's saying. So that was really the intention behind it.
I love it. One of the things that I think I want to make sure our audience like really pays attention to is the opportunity to read the book now before you're actually in the throes
Yes.
of, actually a career change, or you're looking at what's next, because at that point then the panic sort of sets in, right? For what I think you're talking about is, hey, look, let's have a game plan going in. Let's figure out some of the things that are important to understand in terms of the process, but also some ways that you can best position yourself when the time comes.
Mhm.
Do you feel like, based on your work and where you've seen everything sort of really migrate and change since COVID, being prepared for that next opportunity is really important, and it is a practice. You've got to be,
Mhm.
on your A game to, to be ready when the opportunity presents itself. So that's why your book becomes such an essential tool set for them.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's really pandemic or not. I mean, this is just I've known some candidates for over 10 years. Maybe I sent someone on an interview literally 7 years ago, and then I call them now for something I'm working on. Because whenever I
Yeah,
kick off a new search, I first think, "Who do I know?" I don't say, "Let me go find brand new people to call." I'm first networking with my network, and so the people that I call first are the ones that either I've sent them on interviews before, or if I didn't, they responded to me, they were helpful, they were memorable, they presented themselves in a way where I'm like, that's someone to know. That's someone to know. So the people that are kind of getting those calls, they're the ones that they realize the value of always talking to recruiters. Even
sure.
you say, I'm not looking, so and it can be 10 years later. It's not just, oh, I took a job, so I don't need to talk to you. It's like, yeah, I
Yeah,
understand that. But, it's whenever I find that the more junior the role, the more often people don't value that. The C-level people will generally talk to you. Like if you say, hey, I have this other C-level role, they're like, absolutely, let's chat. And it'll say, yeah, it's not for me, but, I might know someone. But as you go more junior, they're like, recruiter, get out of here. you know and, and that's a shame for them, right?
yeah.
Because they won't be thought of in a month or in 3 months or in 5 years for something else.
I always tell the people that I work with, the best thing you can have in your network is a recruiter, right? Because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, you were looking for a job when you found this one. And just because you're not necessarily open today to change,
Hmm.
the circumstances shift rapidly.
Yes.
You could find yourself, sort of unsuspecting, a victim of an unsuspecting layoff, or you could find yourself now working, with a new manager that you just don't get along with, or you've got a team that's just not the right fit any longer. And I think especially through COVID, I think the great opportunity is a lot of people are reevaluating where they are and where they want to spend their
Hmm.
time. And I think, and you mentioned that, like that one person that has been at that job for 15 years, you find that people get complacent on a number of levels. Not only, do I not update my resume with, regularity, or have someone like yourself review it so that it's, crisp and sharp and relevant to what is happening out there in today's market, but also, just in terms of the network that often
Mhm.
people find themselves no longer putting effort towards or building. You and I know a company in town that goes through a ups and downs in terms of the technology space, but people get laid off all the time and then realize, well, my only network was inside this corporate wall. I don't have anybody outside, and so it becomes such a huge challenge for them. And then where do you start? I mean, especially in a situation like that, it's like, you're pushing the panic button, but there's nobody there to really, answer the call for you because you haven't done enough to build that relationship.
Yeah. And my advice of to the people who are listening and like, shoot, I've been that person. I have not
Yeah,
responded to recruiters and now I'm looking is it's okay. And the few things are just, I would honestly say just stop going online and cold emailing as many people as possible the same exact message because it's
yeah,
just soul crushing. And so much of job hunting is confidence and positive thinking. And if you don't have that optimism and confidence, like it just comes through. And
sure.
so I would say just maybe do 20% of the time, like, oh, I looked at job ads, 20%, no more, no more. Don't spend every day, wake up, let me go online. Same ads. Oh no, so what I would tell people to do or advise people to do is start with your network as you talk a lot about, and it's the ripple effect, right? It's people know people, and your network knows recruiters who placed them in that role. Like call someone who's in the job you want, who placed them in that role, or what interviews did they go on through, what recruiters can they introduce you to, those recruiters who sent them, because there's so many recruiters out there. It's not just the brand name
Yeah,
firms. And
yeah,
so finding recruiters that are in your space through your ex colleagues is a great way, because then you get referred in, you know that they're working on positions that interest you, you know they're a good person, and at least igniting your search that way. And then you're catching up with people, and I'd say the second point to that is be ready for those calls and remember the matching journeys.
yeah,
And it's all about journeys. So knowing where you add value to the next place is critical versus let me tell you the 50 things I've done since 22 years ago when I graduated college. It's really based on everything I've done. Here are the three things I'm really good at, and just summing that up. So when someone opens a role, they're like, "Ah, I know who can do that. I know exactly who can do that. This person, they said they do this. They bring companies from there to there, or they do this and that." And so it's just sticking those, like it's kind of your product pitch, right, for yourself,
yeah,
not your entire career history. I think that's where people fall in that trap of let me shove everything in I've ever done into this 30-minute conversation. But then, are you memorable? Will anyone think of
yeah.
you for anything?
So, I love that. I love that perspective. I think one of the things that you said there, though, is that I think is a good reminder for people. When I connect with a recruiter and I've built that rapport and that relationship, maybe there's not a fit today, maybe not tomorrow either, right? But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, also coming back to your recruiter to have something to ask them about. And
Hmm.
hey, what are the roles are you trying to fill? Maybe I know
Hmm.
somebody in my network. One, it keeps you fresh in terms of your other connections and in terms of
Mhm.
actively trying to say, hey, what's important to my big contacts out there. But then if you can create that sense of
Yes,
commerce, right, for the recruiter and a friend or a colleague, you've really done something significant. And I have to assume that the recruiter is going to think kindly of you every single time, right? That there's
yep,
an opportunity that's a good fit for you.
100%. Yeah, I talk a lot in the book about being a giver, and I quote a lot of Adam Grant in my book, and just approach, and people also feel that being a taker feels ugh, when you're
Yeah.
emailing someone, "Hey, I'm still looking. Hey, do you have
Yeah.
anything? Hey, how how's it going? Anything new on your desk?" It just feels ugh. But if you're like, "Hey, I'd love to chat with you about what you're working on. Maybe I know someone," right? You're
Yeah.
you're approaching it as a giver. "Hey, I'd love to tell you what I'm seeing in the market and the trends I've been seeing this quarter." And I there's a gentleman in the book, Bill, who took this to a whole other level when he was looking for a role. And what he did was he had an Excel spreadsheet. He asked every recruiter the same 7 questions. He wrote down answers, and then he told all the other recruiters what other recruiters were saying. And it was so awesome. He was, because
Yeah.
he told me like, "Hey, I talked to these recruiters and they said this about the market. This is the types of roles that they're seeing picking up." And this, I'm like, I want to talk to Bill.
Yeah.
Bill knows what's happening. Like, and he's telling me really cool things that I can't just find online. I don't know what's going on. So it was so awesome. Like, stand out, right? So being a giver, like creating your own knowledge base that you can provide, job seekers, all kinds of things. And it just feels great. So yes, 100%. There's so many things that rather than, will you review my resume? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just different. It's a different conversation.
Yeah, I see that a lot of people I work with and coach, through career transition, there is just this natural hesitancy, to really
Mhm.
do it. And it's often the times, often it's the people that have not spent the time or taken the effort to actually build their larger network either. But you start looking, I had I have someone that I'm actually related to that actually found themselves in a career transition unexpectedly. And I said, well, how many times, you tell me all the time you're recruited to all these companies.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to go hat in hand to that. It's like, well, that they reached out to you initially, right? There was some interest. You said no, but doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't try and re-engage. They thought enough of you to make the call in the first place,
Yes.
right? And it
Mhm.
was actually one of those reach outs to the person that they were. I know it's an ego thing, right? It comes down to being, very either insecure about how to approach it, or, well, I shouldn't have to do this. People should find me. And he had finally reached an age. It's actually my brother reach an age and sort of that level of income that, unfortunately, even though we're not supposed to do that, discrimination really is a real thing and it happens,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so he was in a place where he had always been recruited out of an organization into the next better deal, and all of a sudden those calls kind of dried up, and then the opportunities dried up, and then the company he was with had a massive layoff that he never saw coming. And then all of a sudden, he's like, well, why would I do that? It's like, well, do you like eating? I mean, if you want to get to that next level, you're going to have to, you have to go back and reestablish those
Mhm.
connections, and you maybe eat a little crow. Yeah, I kind of blew you off the last time you called me. I apologize for that. I really was busy, or
Totally.
headed to a conference or whatever. I should have spent, a little bit more time, but do you have time now?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. Those things happen and yeah, I think just owning it versus pretending, yeah, you didn't respond to recruiters in the past. Just say, "Hey, yeah, like you just said, I should have written you back or I should have at least taken the call and here we are. I'm
Yeah.
sorry."
Yeah. And
And
if
it's
they're good
fine.
recruiters, they're gonna understand, right? Because it's
Yes.
it's a numbers game for them as well, right? So at the end of
100%.
the day, it's like, probably no harm, no foul, unless you were a total jerk, and I could actually see that being the case in this situation,
Someti
but
yes.
he doesn't listen to my podcast, and we could talk about him. But, at the end of the day, you always wanna be respectful and mindful, even if you don't have a need and an interest right now. It doesn't mean that won't be the case, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years from now.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
So as far as your book, right? What would you like, our audience to know about it to go pick it up today? I mean, like, what are a couple of things that really stand out in terms of, don't give away any of the secret sauce, but at the end of the day, a couple of things that that you're hearing from folks that have read it
Mhm.
and been
Mhm.
able to apply it in terms of, their search, or even from a company's perspective, right? Why they need
Mhm.
to know it, because they need to know this end of the business and how to engage with someone like yourself to really benefit themselves for, finding the right people for 6 months, a year from now.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing I changed about the book was I first wrote it very fast and horribly, and then I wrote it again. And what I did the second time was I incorporated a ton of research and a ton of interviews. So it's not just me like I'm doing right now, soapboxing about what I think about things. The table of content, the citations at the end are so long because there are so many quotes from experts, and these are like the Adam Grants of the world, but also I interviewed my counterparts, the internal recruiters. We had to go through corporate communications to get approval for chapters.
Oh,
I
wow.
interviewed lots of COOs and CTOs and CIOs and CEOs and all these people, both on the job seeker side and the hiring manager side. So it took me forever to figure out how to put it all together in a streamlined fashion that made sense. But that's what people I think can take away. It's not just my opinion. There's a lot in there of here's how Amanda now who, you brought up ageism, she said, especially as a woman, how she combats that. And what does she do to her LinkedIn profile? How does she negotiate compensation on interviews? And now she's getting calls for seven-figure roles all the time. And
That's
it's just
awesome.
her advice or, women of color and compensation or, just what internal recruiters are expecting from external recruiters or, how I think a lot of it too in the I spend a few chapters in the beginning talking about the dynamics between recruiters and clients because I feel it's so easy to just flip ahead and say, "How do I prepare for this interview?"
Yeah.
But having that fundamental knowledge going in of just how it all works can help you have the right mindset and position the conversation in the right way. And I think it's not something people talk about. Like, how do recruiters even get the clients they have? And I have a lot of also. I know people learn through stories. So every time I have a lesson in the book, I was like sitting down. Sometimes on airplanes, sometimes on vacation. I was just sitting with my head in my hands, like, what's an analogy for this? So either I
I
found one
love it.
online, like I'm quoting Friends, I'm quoting SNL, or I just made something up from my head of like, say you're at the doctor, or say you're a realtor, or say that. So there's analogies and stories throughout the whole thing, just so that it's funny and memorable. But I do think that understanding the pitch process, how recruiters win the work and how those dynamics set up at that moment in the pitch to win the work can affect whether or not you as a candidate even go ahead, or if you're
Yeah.
getting feedback or all that kind of stuff. And it's people don't always think, oh well, maybe the recruiter 3 months ago promised the client some crazy thing to get the work, and that's why I can't even interview. Like, because you could be
Yeah.
like sitting there, I am perfect for this role, but what if the recruiter said, I will only send you people from FANG companies? There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do. So I'm trying to shed a light on all of that behind the scenes so that it's other people's expertise. And also you're just like, oh,
Now
okay.
I get it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And it's not just like, what else can I do? Sometimes it's just move on. Like sometimes there are things you can do. But sometimes it's just move on and,
Well, yeah,
find the
like
right
you said, I
people.
mean, sort of in your subtitle, it's demystifying the executive search, and there is a reason you have to demystify it because it is a
Hmm.
confusing, sometimes often secretive process. If
Yes.
you're, or maybe not so secretive, you're just not asking the right questions, or you don't have the
Exactly.
insight going in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just equipping people with that so that they can ask better questions to navigate the whole process better. I don't think candidates ask me, how many candidates have you sent to this position? Do you have anyone scheduled for final interviews? What has the feedback been on the candidates you've already sent in? When you interviewed me, what could I have done better with you? And so you could ask me, I will give you all these answers,
Man, those are
and
four money questions right there.
right?
Like,
And just knowing, just have you had an offer turned down? Have you,
yeah.
like, how long have you been working on this position? And why is it taking so long? Or am I the first one in, or am I the 20th one in? Or usually it's not
Ah,
20, let's say seventh, but, and that's the other thing to know is usually recruiters are sending like 5 to 10 candidates max in, so are you one of those? And yeah. So all these questions can help you understand how fast the process is going to go, when you're going to get feedback, how many rounds there will be, and how you can position yourself better than everyone else has, all this kind of stuff, right? So the book that's why it's 300 pages. There's so much in there.
well, you had me with SNL story, so I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
I have a whole Stuart Smalley quote. It's just because it's like mindset and confidence, and
I love
yeah,
it.
all kinds of
Well,
stuff.
knowing you as I do, I mean, I love the fact and I think people will see this whether they're watching the video or they're listening to this on the audio platforms. I mean, your energy and your enthusiasm for what you do, it's infectious, and I can see why companies want to work with you and bring you in to help them find the right candidates, but ultimately also why the right candidates want to end up working with you because you have just this, I can see why on the phone it would be like, because you like, I could listen to this all day long. I mean, you're just so calming. I'm like, okay, I'm not looking for a job, but maybe I should be. And maybe,
Well,
you know,
thank
at,
you.
at the end of the day, it's a talent and it's a skill, and you're obviously doing the work that you were destined to do. So kudos to you and congratulations on the book without question.
Thank you. I
We'll,
do
we'll
have the
definitely,
audiobook. I was gonna say, if anyone wants to listen to me for 7 hours and 30 minutes, it's
I think that
now
I
on
I would,
Audible.
yeah, I would encourage that. I think it would be great. I know if you went through the process I did to record my book in audio form, it was a lot of fun because you could actually expand upon it a little bit. You can add some personality, and the written word's the written word, right? But the audio platform gives you a lot of flexibility to kind of do that. So I think people could easily listen to you for 7+ hours, no problem.
I hope so.
I'm just saying. I'm telling you, you've got a skill. So
Thank you.
at this point of the our show, what I always like to do is like shift into ripple mode for a little bit and actually ask you some ripple specific questions. No gotcha questions, but really questions that are kind of fun to ask, fun to answer, and give people just a little sense of you as an individual. If you're cool with it.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, what did the 7-year-old version of Summer want to be when she grew up?
I think I wrote this in my I have all these old journals in here. I think circus clown. I think probably because I was going to the circus a lot at that point.
Circus clown. Okay.
As a kid, my dad would take us to Barnum and Bailey in the city. So I think I did write that down for a moment. And then I went through all my other, but you're a kid, you don't really know what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So 7, sure. I'm gonna go with that.
I love that. That's a good one. If you were doing what you're doing now, which is being a kick-ass entrepreneur, what would you be doing?
Mm, I think I'd probably be a teacher.
Ah.
Probably. Um, yeah, because I remember when I was in college, I was asking people about teaching and just sales. I am a very carrot and stick person with commission. So yeah, so that drew me in. But I
That's great. Yeah,
love
it's definitely no carrot and
teaching.
stick, at least on that end for a
Yeah.
teacher, right?
Yeah, but I love it. I love math. I love teaching. I used when I babysat, I used to always teach the little one math, go to the library, and I was majoring in economics at the time, so her mom was like, "This is amazing. If you can teach her a long division, that'd be great."
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. And you being, carrot and sticks, like, well, hey, look, pay me a little more an hour.
I know, right?
That's
Exactly.
all.
So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
funny. So, what would you consider your superpower aside from your math skills, which sounds like they're pretty
No,
awesome?
they're gone. That was so long ago. Now we have Google. um, I would say the ability to disarm people and connect with people pretty quickly. And my husband has that too, honestly, and I noticed that about him immediately. But people just tell me all kinds of things, and they'll say like, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," and like, so I just think I have this. I feel funny like talking about myself that way, but like I just feel like I have this extreme empathy for everyone and whatever situation they're going through, and the ability to ask a question and really listen to the answer and try to get to the bottom of what's going on. And I've been through a lot, and I feel like there is some value in having depth in what I do, in terms of like life. And, because candidates are going through stuff, whether or not you take a job it's not just about the money or the job. It's
Yeah.
about family. It's about whatever situation you're going through right now. And a lot of people either, and now I'm a mom too, so I can add that in, so I can talk about my son all the time and all the things that come with that. But yeah, I do think there's something there where people just tell me stuff and I love it, and you have to be careful with that, right? Because you can if you were a bad person, you can use that
Yeah.
to your advantage. But
Yep.
I really care about the long-term success of everybody and I think people see that.
That's what makes you a good rippler, I think, really, at the end of the day. I mean, you are definitely that. You're somebody that's committed to whoever's in front of them. If you can add value and contribute to them in some capacity, I think that really shines through for a lot of people. It definitely does for me, for sure. Who inspired you to be the person you are today?
Mm. I have to say my husband. He's the best. He's just the
That's
best.
good. What's your
Yeah.
husband's name?
Yeah.
We'll give
Steve.
him a shout out as well.
Yes, Steve. Yeah,
Steve.
he's
Oh,
awesome.
great name.
I
Yes.
know, I was gonna say, it's the same as your name. Um, yeah, he's just, I met him through a whenever not whenever, like twice. The 2 times I've moved to a new city, I started up a meetup called Table for Six. This was
Oh,
I would have kept it up, but then COVID, it's basically how you get COVID is eating with strangers in a confined space, So I was like, "This sucks." But when I
maybe. Did
moved
anybody actually check you to make sure that you didn't start COVID?
I know, right? It's like, let's eat with people we don't know and inside and, small space. No. I mean,
I
I
don't
could
think
have
you told me about this. This is
yeah,
cool.
I
Okay.
could have had it in Austin because we're such an outdoor space vibe
Yeah.
to Austin, but I do think that having a reservation and being forced to sit down and eat with 5 strangers is awesome. And it was like this group grew to 900 people in DC. Like, it's interesting
Wow.
how many people want friends. And the problem with being I was there was no group for me, meaning like I wasn't trying to find a date. I wasn't into any particular sport. I
Yeah.
didn't have a thing. I was like, I just want to make friends. Like, and so I said, if you're single, if you're married, I don't care what age you are, anything, just
That's
here, this
awesome.
is it's dinner. People would email me, there's or meet up, message me like, hey, can you segment the tables by age? I'm like, no. There are so many like 20s only or whatever's only.
Yeah,
Like, do
yeah,
that. Go do
yeah.
that. Like, this is not, this is, you might eat with someone who's 65, you might eat with someone who's 20, it doesn't matter. And so it was funny because Steve came to the first one I hosted in Virginia, and I he's so friendly and like the kind of person that always makes sure that, and I like tables of 6 because it's easy to have one conversation. Once it gets
Yeah.
to 8, people start branching off, and they still do that with 6, but you can rein them back in.
Yeah, yeah.
But since that's why I like 6 versus the long tables. And so I noticed that Steve would always make sure to include the non-talkers and
Love that.
and just keep it. And that was just his natural state, and that's mine too. And so I would never sit with him. And I set up the seating chart in advance. So I would never have him at my table because it was like a waste of us being together. and so, and I finally told him that after we were married. I was just like, I never had you at my table because we're both so good at including everybody. And I need someone, like, I need to designate people. I'd have like 5 tables of 6 at the same time at a restaurant. And so I'm like, I need to scatter the good
Yeah.
people around to make sure that everyone's having a good time. So anyway, but yeah, I would say just he embodies that. And
That's
so
awesome.
just that kind of empathy and being a giver and just, loving life and all of that is makes me a better person to who I am
That's
today.
great. I love that answer. That's fantastic. Plus, he's got a great name. Let's just be honest. I
He
mean,
does, yes, yes. And our last initial is H also, so yeah,
oh
it's
no, yeah, yeah, that would be true. Yeah, that's fantastic. What's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
I can, like I said in the beginning, I feel unleashed. It's just
Yeah,
like I can just do things that and just kind of test things out. I could have done that before, but it just felt different. So, now I'm like 2 distinguished minutes, sure. Podcast, sure. Book, sure. Meanwhile, I'm still recruiting, right? But
yeah,
it's just so
yeah,
much fun to kind of do this other stuff. And now I'm launching an online course to go with the book because people keep asking me for advice or career coaching and this, and it's not what I do. It's
right,
not.
right.
I work for companies to fill roles, but I'm like, at the same time, I think I could scale that into
Yeah,
something. And so maybe have monthly office hours or have an online video series to go with the book or something like that. So like, I don't think I'd be doing these things if I worked at a firm. It's just been kind
yeah,
of fun to just try things out, see what sticks. And I think the most fun thing is I try it out with my network. I'm
yeah,
always asking for feedback. I'm saying, what do you think of my website? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Or even like I said with the 2 distinguished minutes, like how the idea came to be was from my network. It was just asking people what I should do. And so that's been really fun. It's not just me sitting in a corner thinking up ideas. I'm like inspired by everyone I'm talking to all the time.
I love that. Well, one of the things that we did, and I'll definitely we can talk offline about this, but we created an online community called the Pond, and one of the things that we're
Mm,
doing in there is we've got a career ripple. So love to. We're definitely going to
cool.
feature this episode when it goes live, but we'd love to have you come and even maybe present at some point
I'd
on
love
the
to.
course because I think all of our ripplers would really benefit from that. And yeah, and this as well as anybody, right? We create it as an opportunity to try and create connection between employers and those that are maybe thinking about or are in the midst of a career transition. And
Hmm.
it's such a lonely, isolating, experience, right? So trying to create an opportunity, much like your dinners, right? Try to
Hmm.
get people to talk and engage
Hmm.
because you never know where that might lead and what kind of opportunities might all of a sudden be obvious and present themselves. And so I think that we'd love to have you engaged in that in some capacity. So we'll talk about that for sure.
Perfect.
What two final questions. What does the ripple effect mean to you when you hear that term?
Yeah, I mean, I truly feel that magic happens when people talk to each other, and you never know. Like, I think a lot about people's fan clubs, and I think there's so often people they try to create a new fan club, like trying to meet new people, which is fine. But for me, the ripple effect is you have a fan club. Like, people are cheering you on, and you may not even know they are. Like, they might be someone you talked to 10 years ago. They might be someone who's just following you online, or like they just want you to win because you made an
Yeah,
impact maybe once. And if you connect with them or catch up with them, who knows what doors would open from that conversation.
absolutely.
And that's what I found was starting my own firm is, it was very tempting in the beginning. What I did was I'm in Austin. I should try to get into all these Austin companies. And I had to stop it. And I was like, you know what? I have a fan club. I just have to go remind myself of that and find them. And then
Yeah.
the second I started catching up with people I already knew, doors opened. And maybe I shouldn't ignore Austin, and I don't want to. I'm thrilled. I'm starting to, now that I'm getting invited to speak at things. I'm thrilled to start creating my Austin network, but I really haven't done that as much as I should have been. I mean, book, baby, COVID, all the things, but also like I just haven't been.
A
But
few things
I
going on.
know
Yeah.
all the things.
Yeah.
But, but yeah, I do think that just people lead to people lead to people, and it's unexpected sometimes who is cheering us on until we actually go around and reignite some of those relationships.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah. And what a great definition for sure. Well, last question is, what ripple can I create for you?
Oh, well, thank you for that. Well, you talked about your community, so that would be cool.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, I mean, clearly, if you know anyone who's ever looking to hire an executive, that's the world I'm in. Mainly,
Okay.
I'd say technology, product, digital, data, security, operations, like that world. But also, yeah, if you know anyone who's excellent, who's looking, keeping their eyes open, happy to chat. And yeah, and thanks for sharing, talking about the book today. I think that alone is a ripple in itself.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big fan. I actually do have somebody I will refer you to very soon. I think that could be a good fit for your services. And what's the best way for people to connect with you? Follow you. How do you want people to, engage with you?
Yeah, I'm a recruiter, so I love LinkedIn. That is that
I
is
was
my
gonna
world.
say, yeah,
Yes.
that'd probably be number
So,
one, right?
yeah, so I'd say find me on LinkedIn. I'm an inbox zero, in-mail zero kind of person. I do read and respond to everything. Um, but yeah, connecting on LinkedIn I think is really great because then we see each other's activity, we stay on top of mind with each other.
Yep.
Um, Emails tend to be great because they don't
Emails.
get lost, but also
Yeah.
I get so much email. So I
Yeah.
do like connecting on LinkedIn. I think it's a nice way to stay in touch with people.
Absolutely. Well, we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes for sure. And then the book is on Amazon.
Yep.
Can they get it through your website as well, or is it just exclusively through there, Barnes and Nobles? Where would you like to send people to get the book?
Yeah, on my website it's just a link to Amazon.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd say Amazon, Audible now, which I'm so excited about.
Audible.
Um,
Yeah. Awesome.
yeah, I know. It's like a weekend. So yeah, I'm excited.
Oh,
But
it's that new. Oh,
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. No, the recording was due February 15th. They're like, you cannot kick the can on this any longer. It's been 2 years. Like, I have a baby, so I'm sick now. I'm sick a week a month because he's in school. It used
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
every other week, and so the
Yeah.
first 3 chapters, you won't know this, but I was so sick, and
Oh,
I'm, like, hacking and dying, and so they, like, got, like, all my tea swirling and coughs out of the first 3 chapters, and then I got because they were like, "This is due February 15th." Like, they had a fine on me if I
they
did
got to
not.
get it going.
I
Yeah.
was like, but I have a toddler, and I'm like, we're always, kids bring home all the things,
Oh,
and so
yeah.
it's hard to find like a 3-week stretch where I'm not coughing. It's very hard. So anyway, it's now on Audible.
That's
I
awesome.
just finished, just got it done. So
Well,
yeah,
you'll be immune by the time you do the second book. So
I know, right? No, no, I'm done. One book, one book. It's a lot of work.
yeah, it is a lot of work, but well, congratulations on everything you got going on. I am so excited for what you're doing today, where the future lies for you. I mean, it's great. I think everybody that has tuned in today will absolutely benefit from just what you do and how you do it, and just a little bit of pulling the curtain back and helping us really truly demystify the process. And I encourage everybody to go out and get your book. I encourage people to, to link, connect with you on LinkedIn, and, just continue to learn from you. I can't wait to learn about the course and see what we can do to support that as well, because I think that sounds like a fantastic idea.
Thank you. And likewise, thank you for having me on. I'm just grateful to be a part of this and one of your distinguished guests on your side. So thank you. Thank you for the
Well,
invitation.
I appreciate that so much. Guys, we will be back again with another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast. But until then, ripple on.